What were some of the biggest surprises about the analyst job compared to what you expected? Because once we're fast forwarding and talking about your analyst career here, like you probably had all these expectations going into college and recruiting for it. Like what was different than what you expected?
Overall, I think it was pretty similar to what I expected. I think if you go through the investment banking recruiting process, you're doing a lot of networking, you're learning about the job, and then you ultimately secure that internship before transitioning a full-time role. I think the job, for the most part, lines up to what you've experienced and everything you've learned so far, at least for myself. With main difference of like, okay, instead of an end date on the internship, right, this goes on into for your analyst years or into perpetuity.
Yeah.
I think the thing that was actually probably most surprising for me going into investment banking, and I don't think it's quite talked about enough, is the transition from going into school and college and university life into full-time working adult life, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I think that transition is probably more pertinent for folks to kind of consider and think about how they're going to kind of deal with, because you're going from a situation, right, where you live next to, I don't know, 100 of your closest friends, all within a 20-minute proximity, right, and you run into them all time, all day long.
Hmm.
And whereas when you're in a bank, right, you have your group, and I absolutely love my analyst class. I'm close with them too. I still keep up with many of them today, but it's a
Yeah.
different dynamic, right? And you're suddenly maybe you're working weekends, um,
Hmm.
and so take some time to think about like, okay, once I'm in that full time role, like how will I keep up, my relationships with other folks? How will I make time for
Hmm.
myself that's not necessarily built into like a college environment?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it definitely is a pivot where instead of focusing exclusively on the things that you need to do in your calendar, like you're part of a team and you're kind of beholden to other people in a way that you're really not in school. And so, how did you actually like set up systems to transition to that and to like succeed as an analyst? Like for all the analysts out there, how do they become a top bucket and like an incredible rock star performer like you were at Guggenheim?
Yeah. Um, My thinking is my thinking is that for a very simple question at surface level, it's almost like a bit loaded for me in some regards because I have a couple perspectives around this. But I think qualities that work well for any analyst is that you have a can-do attitude.
Hmm.
You're always clarifying questions on the deliverables specifically. You're managing
Mm,
expectations, and
yeah.
you generally have that get-it-done mentality to work with. And I think if
Hmm.
you show up to work every single day with that attitude, people are going to love you. People are going to want to work for you. That's sending you into the top bucket analyst role.
Hmm. Yeah, okay, gotcha. So you're clarifying questions on deliverables, like asking, like, hey, what is this? When do you need this by? Managing those expectations, saying, like, yeah, I can get that to you after I do this other thing that's super urgent. Love that advice. And so, what was the point when, like, the switch flipped for you, where you realized that you could operate at the high level that the groups at Guggenheim were expecting and make that transition from banking as a student into banking as, like, an actual professional?
Yeah, I definitely had that flip of a switch moment. I think after you get kind of one full transaction under your belt and you
Hmm.
see the whole process from start to end, you have a pretty good sense of like, oh, like this is what I can expect going forward. Because everything
Hmm.
is very novel and very new the first time you go around it. But once you see the whole set, you're like, oh, like for the most part, I know what's going to take place now.
Hmm.
And then you're feeling a lot better going into the second, third transactions.
Hmm.
The moment that it clicked for me, like really, really clicked for me, I think, was in my
Hmm.
second year when I was single staffed, just a managing director, associate, and myself
Wow.
on a data center securitization. And it was one of the first securitizations for data centers, like coming out as asset-backed security. And like
Hmm.
didn't really work in financings at the time, nor knew what a securitization was, and so
Yeah.
building that 30-year monthly model was a very novel
Gosh.
experience, and my associate at the time was completely swamped on some other live deal, of course, and transaction. So it was really just me building this model, hoping that my numbers are correct. And they
Yeah.
ultimately and suddenly one day they're like, okay, cool, the deal's done. And I was like, oh, like great, I guess my numbers were good, hopefully. And so that was the moment for me. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, like I know I can do this job.
Yeah, yeah, that's a real moment of truth. As soon as someone like isn't there to check your models for the first time, that's like a huge moment as an analyst. Where I remember some of the first times that that happened, I was like, wait a second, like this is like $1 billion deal. Like, isn't there someone supposed to be holding my hand a little bit? But ultimately,
Can
that's
I
why
give you
these
a flip
jobs.
side example when I was like, oh, like I don't know how to do this job?
Yeah, please, please.
it was like around the exact same time as this other deal, the
Mhm.
asset-backed securitization. But I got snapped over the July 4th weekend, of course. Um,
Mhm.
and I was having to work on the Bloomberg terminal, and I had no
Mhm.
idea how to use it, no idea
Yeah.
what figures I was pulling, and like
Yeah.
my associate had completely bailed on me for the
Oh
weekend,
gosh.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
She was lateraling or transfer recruiting for some other job elsewhere,
Yeah.
um, and I had to call my friend on Morgan Stanley's DCM team to be like, please, how do I possibly make this work? And so there are also going to be
Yeah.
times where you feel like you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
that you're going to have no clue how to do something else, and it is okay to ask for help.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and that goes also back to the component of like taking time to be a little bit social in undergrad and like make friends with the other people in your class who are doing those banking things. Was this a Ross person at MS?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so you're gonna have these friends for life, and they're gonna go off and do like incredible things, and you just want to be able to make sure that you can call them and be like, "Have you used Cap IQ? Like, do you know how to do this?" Like, and that sort of thing is a much lower pressure way to ask than going to the VP and being like, "Sorry, by the way, I'm ignorant about something that I should know how to do." And so you did an incredible job at Guggenheim. I remember you saying that you were one of the absolute top performers at the group, which I'm not surprised about given your background. And so, what do people misunderstand about like getting up to that level and getting to like that coveted top bucket?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that the bank will accurately capture all your activities and efforts for the year and reflect that in the bucket categorizations. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's just not true. There's so many things going on at the bank, and each bank is going to have a different system for how they decide end of year analyst bonuses. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's like a COO who's not necessarily related to the deal teams.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's in conjunction with the associates that you're working with. Maybe it's a mixture of both. But in any
Mm-hmm.
case, it's an imperfect process, right? First of all,
Mm-hmm.
there's a recency bias that's associated with it, right? That's just human.
Yeah.
And then secondly, right? So at least for Guggenheim, they gather the associates and they say like, oh, like how should we rank this person? How should we rank
Mm-hmm.
this person? And so a lot of it falls onto the associates to kind of go to bat for their analysts that they're
Yeah.
working with to say like, oh, my person deserves this top bucket because they
Mm-hmm.
did X, Y,
Mm-hmm.
and Z.
Yeah.
And so in some cases, it comes down to the personality of the associate that you're working with, or the associate that you worked with most recently. And
Mm-hmm.
so, right, if you're not a top bucket analyst, right, and you didn't get quite what you wanted, right, these decisions are imperfect. And if you see
Mm-hmm.
someone else, you're like, why did that person get it? Right, the decisions are imperfect, and that's the biggest
Yeah.
misconception, I'd say.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. No, it definitely goes back to that point on randomness that we are talking about, where a lot of the times there are just pieces that are a little bit out of your control. But there's a positive correlation coefficient between performance and top bucket. And so if that is something that you're interested in, because you want to do that for recruiting or just to like to prove to yourself that you can, it probably still is worth doing the things you'd expect to do to get that distinction.
Yeah. Can I
Uh,
toss in a perhaps controversial my 2 cents on top bucket?
Please.
The best advice that I ever received in investment banking was when the analyst next to me during my internship told me, don't be a top bucket analyst, try and be a
Hmm.
B analyst. Which to
Interesting.
me, in my 20-year-old intern mind, was like unfathomable to comprehend. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I gotta be the best. I have to do this. Like, I gotta show everybody that I'm the best because I am the best, right? Like, that was like the mentality I had
Yeah.
back then. And I didn't really understand until quite maybe my second or even like a year out of investment banking.
Huh.
And his rationale for it was that, right, like you obviously want to do a good job. Like that, that's not what I'm saying. Like, do a good
Hmm.
job in your job.
Hmm.
But if you're always the one that's going above and beyond,
Hmm.
and you're always the one that's called up, and you're always saying yes to everything, whether you get that top bucket, the difference between a top bucket and medium average bucket,
Hmm.
right? Maybe is $10,000, maybe
Yeah.
$20,000, depending on the bank, right? That 20
Hmm.
would be a large gap. Um,
Hmm.
you're going to be working a lot more hours for that top bucket rather than that middle bucket,
Hmm.
and I think your learning experience is incremental, right? After you're doing from your fifth deal to your seventh deal or something like that,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? It's all important, but you also have to look out for the sustainability of yourself as well, right? And the
Hmm.
sustainability of your career. And I wish I took something that was not something I learned quite till later on. Like, do a good job, but it's
Yeah.
also okay to be in the middle, right? And it's you don't owe your employer. I thought that I owed Guggenheim everything, right? They gave me the look, them. They gave me the job offer. I have to do everything for them, and like I love them. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right? This is an employment contract, right? That's one of the transitions from college to work, right?
Yeah.
Like I am getting paid to do this job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair context, and I think that a lot of people forget that this is truly a marathon, not a sprint to some extent. And like, yeah, you've got to pull the all nighter every once in a while when you're working on a deal, and you got to like
Yep.
do a good job and have a good attitude and whatnot. So I don't think either of us are disputing that. But that's interesting. You were literally saying, don't be a top bucket analyst because you've got to like make this career last for decades, and you got to find a way to do that that's sustainable for you. And for some people, they probably could do that and like be a top bucket analyst for 20 years straight. But a lot of people, it's like it's sort of learning how to stick up to yourself with regard to staffings and like have that balance so you can focus on doing a good job on a smaller number of projects than trying to do everything for everyone all the time. And I think that a lot of people also don't realize how much more important the later years of your career are than the early years of your career. And so like it was kind of shocking to me to like see that you could make as much in like 1 year as a VP as you made in all of your years as an analyst and associate combined at
Right.
some of these
Right.
banks.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. This context, at least for myself, right, it's circumstantial. I was someone that was a little bit too much of a yes person, that was always saying yes. I didn't know how to stick up for myself, and that ultimately led to my burnout in high finance, a little bit later on. And so, marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.